found the best zoo habitats on the planet and brought them together in one place. A world we call the ultimate zoo.
Imagine an unforgiving landscape filled with strange and exotic animals, where mountainous dunes rise like waves on an ocean of sand, where oppressive heat in the day gives way to bone-chilling nights. Now, imagine that same desert, but in Nebraska. Home of the world's largest man-made desert in the biggest glazed geodesic dome on the planet. But how do you recreate an indoor desert in the middle of the Cornhusker State? Find out at Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo, where Ultimate Zoo takes you inside the Desert Dome.
There basically is not another desert exhibit like this really anywhere in the world.
It all began with one man's vision. Dr. Lee Simmons, director of Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo, grew up in the Arizona desert. He wanted to share his love of this rarely seen landscape with those that might not otherwise get a chance to experience it. He dreamed of a total immersion desert exhibit, representing realistic geologic features for three vastly different desert environments. But achieving such a grand vision took careful planning.
What we did was we carved a model of all of the rock work in here and of the mountain first so that we got to touch the feel of it. It was the shape of it. Then we scanned that, digitized that into a computer model.
Engineers then worked from that model to create the exhibit, spanning over an acre, divided into three distinctly different deserts. The Namibian Desert of southwestern Africa, the Red Center of Australia, and the Sonoran Desert of the southwest United States and northern Mexico. And in the middle of it all, Central Mountain, a 55-foot tall, fiber-reinforced concrete mountain that separates all three deserts. To create three deserts, the zoo would need a lot of sand, and to support all that sand, it would take a strong foundation. So they hauled in and poured 10,000 tons of concrete, which is enough to pour a 4-inch slab over 6 football fields. With a foundation in place, engineers then constructed the dome itself. The reason for a geodesic dome was because its shape and materials would allow the most light penetration. Also with a dome, you don't need any support columns, which could get in the way of viewing areas. After the building was completed, the zoo realized that one of their biggest challenges with a dome-shaped building was controlling the climate inside what is essentially a 13-story magnifying glass. To regulate the temperature, darker panels were placed near the top to filter summer sunlight, and lighter panels were placed at the bottom to capture sunshine during the winter months. As the angles of the sun changes throughout the year, these different shades of plexiglass help keep the temperature inside the dome from becoming too hot. But the zoo also had to figure out how to cool the enormous space to realistically reproduce the chilly desert night.
We've got an ice house. We freeze big tubs of ice all night, and then in the daytime, we use that ice to make chilled water to air condition the bottom 15 feet. We don't try to air condition the whole dome because nobody in the world could afford that. The top part gets to be 140 or 150 degrees, and we just vent that off with big fans at the top of the dome.
Once the climate issues were handled, it was time to build the desert. Dr. Simmons was determined to make it the most realistic indoor desert recreation on Earth. To create the ultimate African desert experience, the zoo hauled in 300 tons of red sand from a mine site in Arizona to fill the Namibian section of the dome. Result? The only 30-foot tall man-made Namibian sand dune in the United States. And that's exactly what makes this exhibit so impressive. It's the authentic touches throughout. In the Australian desert section, the zoo erected a replica of Ayers Rock, one of Australia's most famous landmarks, and the world's largest monolithic rock. But before the zoo could bring in the creatures of the desert and complete Dr. Simmons' vision, they had to fill the dome with the vegetation so many of the animals depend on. Yes, there are plants in the desert. With nearly 200 different species of desert plants from 3 continents, and no natural rain in the enclosed dome, keeping them all alive is a challenge. So, the zoo implemented a gutter system on the outside of the dome, connected to several large storage tanks. These tanks are used for collecting rainwater outdoors, which, in turn, is routed into the dome and used to water the plants. They've also designed an irrigation and drainage system underneath the 4 feet of heated soil, allowing the zoo to water the plants without risk of rotting the roots. In the desert, as in the rest of the world, where there's water, there's life. So it was time for the final element in completing the vision, bringing in all the creatures of the desert, both predator and prey, to share this most spectacular habitat. But can so many animals that have never been together in one place before survive under one Nebraskan dome? Find out next on Ultimate Zoo.
We'll just march from there right out to here.
More than 3 years and a whopping $31 million later, Dr. Simmons' dream was becoming a reality. Henry Dorley Zoo created the world's largest glazed geodesic dome, housing the world's largest indoor desert. Dr. Lee Simmons had a vision for Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo to create 3 naturalistic desert environments, all under one massive geodesic dome. His challenge was to ensure the plants and animals would thrive in the most complex desert exhibit ever designed. It was in the summer of 2002 when construction was finally completed on the world's largest indoor desert. The last stage in creating a complete desert ecosystem was to bring in all the creatures native to the 3 deserts. Alan Holst has been working with animals for over 27 years. As the senior supervisor for Desert Dome, he is ultimately responsible for the building, upkeep, and well-being of the animals.
As an interactive exhibit, it does show something about predator-prey relationships. We're definitely not a wildlife company. We're I believe, in the business to show the value of these animals that may or may never see in the wild.
When introducing these animals, the zoo was careful not to rush the process, as changes in the environment can be stressful for the animals. But the transition went as smoothly as possible, as the animals' new habitats are authentic and naturalistic. As part of the ultimate indoor desert exhibit, the zoo had to incorporate side-by-side habitats to illustrate the predator-prey relationship that exists in the wild. As with the pumas and peccaries, in the largest of the 3 exhibits, the Sonora. Here, these fierce predators spend their day stalking their prey, the peccaries, just as they would in the wild. But it's the pumas, or cougars, that are the fans' favorite at the Desert Dome. Just last year, the zoo rescued 2 male pumas when their mother was killed in the wild. The introduction of these rare wild cats is important to the integrity of the exhibit.
At one time, they basically inhabited the whole of North America, but as population declined and humans encroached on their areas, the European kept getting pushed back. But it's obvious here in the last 10 years or so that they finally learned how to adapt, and they are making a comeback.
But pumas and peccaries aren't the only residents doing well in the Sonoran exhibit. Dr. Simmons' vision included a diverse representation of desert